Hi everybody, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to talk to you about some of the things I keep in mind when I'm combining herbs. So I actually have a lot of tinctures to make for clients in clinic, and I thought I would take you along with me as I make all of these and explain some of the things that I keep in mind when I am formulating or combining herbs for my clients. So when you think about using herbs, there are sort of two main categories. One is called a simple, and a simple sounds exactly like it is. It's using one single herb to either treat something or alleviate a symptom. So for example, if you've ever made a cup of peppermint tea before, that is a simple herb formulation, meaning you're only using one plant. When you only use one, you don't really have to worry about combining energetics or different chemical constituents. You know, it's pretty easy. But there are some downsides to using only a single herb, because what I have found is that when you combine herbs, you have an effect known as synergy, meaning that the sum of all of the herbs is actually greater than if you had just used them individually. So they almost work together in teams. Now, of course, when you combine herbs, as I mentioned, there are some things you have to take into consideration. I also wanted to point out that if you start working with plants in this way, it's really, really important to kind of keep track of your information and to build a Materia Medica. Now, I have a pretty old video, so please forgive the bad audio and the length of the video and that type of thing, but yeah, I'll link it up here because it's actually one of my most popular videos where I talk about my clinic binder and how I organize all of that. So we're gonna get to making tinctures, and I'll chat to you about the four main areas that I take into consideration when I'm blending herbs. So when I talk about formulating and combining herbs, what I'm going to teach you today applies to both tinctures and teas, so you can keep that in mind. So one of the first areas you need to take into consideration is astringency. And if you aren't familiar with the term astringency, it's the ability of a plant's constituents to constrict tissues. So one of the best ways to experience astringency is to go out and taste an astringent herb. Two excellent examples would be calendula, okay, so pot marigold flowers, and lavender. Go out and chew on a piece of lavender. Even better, a pine needle, and immediately your mouth will start to dry up. That is astringency. So when you're combining herbs, you have to be really careful that you don't combine 3 or 4 really, really astringent herbs, because the formulation is going to become too drying for yourself or your client. So I would never use something like pine, rosemary, and calendula in the same formula. It would be far too astringent. So another area you want to keep in mind is bitterness. And bitterness is actually a very personal thing, meaning that some people, some clients or yourself, will have a very high tolerance for bitterness, and other people will not. So some of the things I'll ask my clients are, do you drink your coffee black? Do you like dark chocolate? If your client is someone, or you are someone who takes your coffee triple, your tolerance for bitterness is going to be pretty low. Now, for a lot of formulas, bitters are really, really beneficial. So digestive formulas, detoxifying formulas, you want some bitter. But if you add too much, the combined effect of bitterness causes an emetic feeling. So your client's going to start to feel nauseated and may even vomit if the bitter level is too high. And that goes for blending for teas or any kind of herbal formula. Another area which is very personal to either yourself or your client or whoever you're formulating for would be pungency, and I'm talking about heat. So all of my formulas will have some level of heat to it. Heat is actually really important because it helps to drive the chemical constituents or the medicine of the plant to all the areas of the body that it needs to get to. But if you put too much in, you can irritate the mucous membranes, you can, and make it unpalatable for either yourself or your client. So it's really important that you don't add too much pungency. So one of the things I'll ask is, what is your tolerance for heat? Are things like curry or spicy foods a regular part of your diet? And if it's not, then I may start gentle. Things like bitterness and heat can always be built up over time because the tolerance builds up over time. But I would never start out with a beginning formula with something that was too hot or spicy. So if you do decide you want to venture into the world of tinctures, a graduated cylinder is an excellent investment. In fact, I have a really great video about basic herbal equipment that you'll need, and I'll link that up here. So the last area that you want to keep in mind is herbs that have something known as Immenagog properties. Okay, so an Immenagog is a herb that has the ability to affect the hormones of the female reproductive system. So this is different than a uterine, okay? A uterine, so if you ever see that term in your herbal books, a uterine is something that affects the physical muscle. So if a herb is a uterine antispasmodic, that means it's going to reduce spasms in the muscle itself. Immenagogs, however, actually affect the hormones. So you have to be really careful that you don't combine too many Immenagog herbs together in the same formula, because then we start pushing the body in a direction. And the type of herbal medicine I practice is more gentle and supportive. So if you combine too many Immenagog herbs, what ends up happening is you could really throw off a woman's reproductive cycle. So I got all of my tinctures made for clinic, which is great. So just to recap, the 4 areas you want to keep in mind when you are combining herbs or formulating would be bitterness, astringency, pungency or heat, and those Immenagog properties I talked about at the end. I hope this information helps to supplement the learning that you're doing on your own, either in school or in books. And I hope that this has answered some of your questions and maybe put aside some fears you have about combining herbs and allowing them to work together. I do recommend starting with teas if you're brand new to this, because it's really easy to mix a single batch of tea, and if it tastes awful, you just chuck it. You don't waste as much herb material that way. If you've got any questions, comments, you can leave those below. And if you like my content, please consider subscribing to the channel. And until next time, this is Correne from Spirea Herbs, wishing you health and wellness. So if you decide that you want to get into the world of tinctures, can you turn that off? I can't get the lid open.